The sun beat down on the Pride lands, baking the earth to a cracked, dusty brown. The once lush grasslands were now brittle and dry, the watering hole a muddy puddle barely enough for the warthogs. A terrible drought had gripped the land, forcing even the strongest lions to venture far beyond their usual hunting grounds in search of food and, more importantly, water. Kovu, now a strong and respected member of the Pride, felt the weight of responsibility. He remembered the harshness of the Outlands, the constant struggle for survival under Zira's rule. He wouldn't let the Pride suffer the same fate. "We need to check Scar's old den," Kovu announced to a small hunting party. "It's a long shot, but there might be a hidden spring or some underground water source we can use." The others hesitated. Scar's den was a place of darkness and bad memories, a place no lion willingly went. But the desperation of the drought outweighed their fear. They followed Kovu, their paws kicking up dust as they made their way towards the shadowed, forbidding entrance. The air grew heavy with the scent of decay and forgotten nightmares as they approached the cave. Even Kovu felt a shiver run down his spine. This was where Scar had plotted his treachery, where darkness had festered. He hoped they wouldn't find anything more than dust and echoes. The hunting party cautiously entered the den. The air inside was stale and heavy, thick with the scent of dust and forgotten bones. Sunlight struggled to penetrate the gloom, casting long, distorted shadows that danced across the cave walls. Kovu led the way, his senses on high alert. He remembered Zira's stories of secret passages and hidden chambers within the den, places where Scar had kept his most prized possessions and plotted his most sinister schemes. "Spread out," Kovu instructed, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "Check every corner, every crevice. Look for any sign of water, even a damp patch on the wall." The lions fanned out, their eyes scanning the darkness. Some were visibly uncomfortable, their tails twitching nervously as they navigated the treacherous terrain. The ground was littered with loose rocks and debris, making each step a challenge. The silence was broken only by the occasional scuttling of unseen creatures and the heavy breathing of the lions. Kovu made his way deeper into the den, towards what he remembered as Scar's main chamber. The walls here were covered in crude carvings, depicting scenes of Scar's reign and his ambition to rule the Pride lands. A chill ran down Kovu's spine as he gazed at the images of Scar's cruel face, a reminder of the darkness he had escaped. He shook his head, trying to clear his mind. He wouldn't let Scar's legacy haunt him. He had a job to do, a pride to protect. Water was what they needed, not memories. As Kovu reached the center of the main chamber, he paused, sniffing the air. There was a faint, almost imperceptible scent, different from the musty odor of the cave. It was a scent of milk and something else, something vulnerable. Suddenly, a weak, high-pitched sound echoed through the chamber. It was a cry, barely audible but undeniably there. Kovu's ears perked up, his body tensing. He exchanged a look with one of the other lions, who had also heard the sound. "Did you hear that?" Kovu whispered. The lion nodded, his eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. It sounded like a cub. Kovu's heart skipped a beat. A cub? Disgusting. It was impossible. And yet, the cry echoed again, clearer this time, laced with pain and desperation. "Stay here," Kovu instructed, his voice firm. "I'm going to check it out." He followed the sound, his paws patting softly on the dusty floor. The cry seemed to be coming from deeper within the chamber, from a dark corner hidden behind a pile of rubble. Kovu cautiously approached the rubble, his senses on high alert. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew that whatever was making that sound was in trouble. He pushed aside a large rock, revealing a narrow opening in the wall. The cries were much louder now, filling the small space with their plaintive sound. Kovu took a deep breath and squeezed through the opening into the unknown. The narrow passage opened into a small, circular chamber. The air was thick with dust and the scent of desperation. In the center of the chamber, huddled against the cold stone floor, was a tiny cub. It was no bigger than Kovu's paw, its fur matted and dirty. Its eyes were closed, and its tiny body trembled with each weak cry. Kovu cautiously approached the cub, his heart aching with pity. He had seen cubs before, playful and full of life. This one was different, weak and alone, fighting for survival in the most unlikely of places. As he got closer, the cub opened its eyes. They were small and unfocused, but even in the dim light, Kovu recognized something that made his blood run cold. The eyes were the same piercing green as Scar's. The same cold, calculating gaze that had haunted Kovu's nightmares for years. Kovu froze, his mind reeling. It couldn't be. Scar was dead. He had seen it with his own eyes. But the eyes, there was no mistaking them. He took a step back, his instincts screaming at him to flee. This cub, this tiny, vulnerable creature, could be a threat, a reminder of the darkness that had once consumed the Pride Lands. But then, he looked again at the cub's trembling body, at its desperate cries for help. He saw not a monster, but a helpless creature in need of care. He was torn. What should he do? Kovu knew he couldn't leave the cub to die. Despite the unsettling resemblance to Scar, the cub was just a baby, innocent and vulnerable. He gently scooped the cub up in his mouth, careful not to hurt it. The cub whimpered softly, nuzzling against Kovu's fur. He turned and made his way back through the narrow passage, emerging into the main chamber where the other lions were waiting anxiously. They gasped when they saw him carrying the cub. "What is that?" one of the lions asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "A cub," Kovu replied, his voice low. "I found it in a hidden chamber." He carried the cub back to Pride Rock, the other lions trailing behind him, their faces etched with concern and confusion. As they approached Pride Rock, Kiera saw them coming and rushed forward, her eyes widening as she saw the tiny cub in Kovu's mouth. "Kovu, what's going on?" she asked, her voice filled with worry. Kovu gently placed the cub on the ground in front of Kiera. The cub whimpered again, its eyes still unfocused. Kiera cautiously approached the cub, sniffing it gently. Then, she looked up at Kovu, her eyes filled with shock and disbelief. "Kovu, those eyes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They look just like—" Kovu nodded grimly. "I know," he said. "I saw it too." The weight of the situation settled upon them both. This was more than just a lost cub. This was something that could shatter the fragile peace they had worked so hard to build. The news of the cub spread quickly through Pride Rock. Lions gathered, their murmurs of shock and disbelief growing louder. Nala, Simba's queen and a wise, respected member of the Pride, approached Kiera and Kovu, her expression grave. "What is the meaning of this?" she asked, her gaze fixed on the cub. Kiera explained how Kovu had found the cub in Scar's den, alone and abandoned. She hesitated before mentioning the eyes, but Nala saw the truth in her face. "Scar's eyes," Nala whispered, her voice trembling. "It's impossible." "That's what I thought," Kovu said, "but there's no denying it. The cub looks just like him." Nala shook her head. "Scar had no heirs. We would have known. Zero would have made sure we knew." "But what if—" Kiera began, then trailed off, unsure how to voice her doubts. What if Zira had a secret? Kovu finished for her. She always spoke of Scar's grand plan, a plan that would outlive him. What if this cub is part of that plan? A wave of fear rippled through the gathered lions. The memory of Scar's reign, of his cruelty and treachery, was still fresh in their minds. The idea that his bloodline might continue, that his darkness might resurface, was terrifying. Suspicion began to fester, directed not only at the cub, but also at Kovu, the outlander who had brought it into their midst. Could Kovu be trusted? Was he truly loyal to the Pride Lands? Or was he secretly working to resurrect Scar's legacy? The fragile peace hung precariously in the balance. As the tension at Pride Rock thickened, Kovu found himself reliving moments from his past. He remembered Zira's unwavering devotion to Scar, her relentless pursuit of vengeance against Simba. He recalled the many times she had spoken of Scar's vision for the future, a future where the Outlanders would rule the Pride Lands. Flashback sequence begins. A younger Kovu sat at Zira's feet, listening intently as she spoke in hushed tones. "Scar was a genius, Kovu," she said, her eyes gleaming with fanaticism. He had plans that no one else could understand, plans that will still come to fruition, even in death. Kovu frowned, confused. But how, mother? Scar is gone. Zira smiled, a chilling, predatory smile. He had contingencies, Kovu. Secrets. There are lionesses scattered across the land, loyal to Scar and his cause. Some are in hiding, waiting for the right moment. And some carry his bloodline. A true heir to the throne. Kovu's eyes widened. You mean Scar has cubs? Perhaps, Zira said, her voice cryptic. Or perhaps he will have cubs. The details are not important. What matters is that Scar's legacy will live on. And you, Kovu, will be instrumental in making that happen. Flashback sequence ends. The memory struck Kovu with the force of a physical blow. Zira's words echoed in his mind, confirming his worst fears. The cub with Scar's eyes was not a random occurrence. It was a deliberate act, a piece of Scar's twisted plan come to fruition. But what was Kovu supposed to do now? Was he destined to fulfill Zira's vision? Or could he break free from the chains of his past and forge his own destiny? The choice was his, but the consequences would affect the entire Pride Lands. The debate at Pride Rock raged on. Some lions argued that the cub should be banished, cast out into the wilderness to fend for itself. They feared that raising it within the pride would be a dangerous gamble, a betrayal of everything they had fought for. Others, mostly the younger lions who had never known Scar's reign, felt a sense of pity for the cub. They argued that it was innocent, a blank slate untainted by Scar's evil. To condemn it for the sins of its ancestor would be unjust. We can't just abandon it, Kiera pleaded, her voice rising above the din. It's a cub, a baby. It needs our help. But what if it grows up to be like Scar? One of the older lions retorted, his eyes filled with suspicion. What if it inherits his thirst for power, his cruelty? We can teach it differently, Kovu interjected, his voice firm. We can show it the value of kindness, of compassion. We can raise it to be a force for good, not evil. That's a risk we can't afford to take, another lion countered. Scar's blood runs in its veins. It's only a matter of time before it shows its true colors. The argument went back and forth, each side convinced of the righteousness of their cause. The tension in the air was palpable, threatening to erupt into open conflict. Even Simba, who had always been a beacon of wisdom and reason, seemed uncertain. He paced back and forth, his brow furrowed in thought, weighing the potential consequences of each decision. The fate of the cub, and perhaps the fate of the Pride Lands, hung in the balance. Kiera watched the debate unfold, her heart heavy with concern. She trusted Kovu implicitly, but even she couldn't deny the unsettling resemblance between the cub and Scar. Doubts gnawed at her, whispering insidious questions in her mind. Was Kovu truly seeing the cub for what it was, or was he blinded by his own desire to prove himself worthy of the Pride Lands? Was she, in her eagerness to maintain peace, ignoring a potential threat? She looked at the cub, huddled on the ground, shivering with cold and fear. It was so small, so helpless. Could such a tiny creature truly pose a danger to their pride? And yet, the memory of Scar's reign, of the destruction and suffering he had caused, was still vivid in her mind. She knew firsthand the depths of his cruelty, the lengths he would go to achieve his goals. She glanced at Kovu, his face etched with determination. He believed in the cub, believed that it could be raised to be good. But what if he was wrong? What if Scar's darkness was too deeply ingrained, too powerful to overcome? The cost of being wrong could be catastrophic, not only for the Pride Lands, but for her relationship with Kovu. She had staked everything on their love, on their ability to bridge the gap between the Outlanders and the Pride Landers. Could she risk it all on this one tiny cub? The weight of the decision pressed down on her, threatening to crush her spirit. She needed time to think, to sort through her conflicting emotions and decide what was truly best for her pride. Despite the growing dissent and Kiera's internal struggles, Kovu made his decision. He couldn't abandon the cub, not after finding it alone and helpless in the darkness of Scar's den. He believed that every lion deserved a chance at a good life, regardless of their lineage. He was living proof of that himself. He stepped forward, his voice ringing with conviction. "I will raise him," he announced, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. "I will take responsibility for him. I will teach him the ways of the Pride Lands, the values of compassion and respect." Some lions gasped, while others grumbled in disapproval. Simba watched Kovu intently, his expression unreadable. "And what will you name him?" Simba asked, his voice low. Kovu looked down at the tiny cub, its green eyes gazing up at him with innocent curiosity. He thought of the hope that Kiera had given him, the chance she had taken on him, the Outlander. He wanted to give this cub the same opportunity, the same chance to break free from the darkness of the past. "Hope," Kovu said, his voice filled with emotion. "I will name him Hope. May he be a symbol of a new beginning, a future free from the shadows of Scar." A hush fell over the crowd. The name hung in the air, a fragile promise in the face of uncertainty. Whether Hope would truly live up to his name remained to be seen, but for now, it was a beacon of light in a time of darkness. Kovu had made his choice, and the fate of the Pride Lands rested on his shoulders. Life at Pride Rock settled into an uneasy rhythm. Kovu dedicated himself to caring for Hope, feeding him, cleaning him, and protecting him from the harsh sun. Kiera, though still conflicted, helped where she could, ensuring that Hope received the nourishment and attention he needed. However, the initial acceptance of Hope was fragile. Many lions kept their distance, their eyes filled with suspicion and distrust. They watched Hope closely, searching for any sign of Scar's influence, any indication that he was a threat to their pride. The other cubs, sensing the unease of their parents, were hesitant to play with Hope. He spent much of his time alone, observing the other lions from a distance, his green eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and sadness. Kovu tried to encourage him to interact with the other cubs, but Hope remained wary, sensing their apprehension. Even the drought seemed to worsen, casting a long shadow over the Pride Lands. The watering hole dwindled further, the hunting became more difficult, and the lions grew increasingly restless. Some whispered that Hope was a curse, a sign of Scar's continued influence, a harbinger of bad luck. Kovu fought against these whispers, trying to reassure the pride that Hope was not to blame for their troubles. But the seeds of doubt had been sown, and they were beginning to take root. The hope that Kovu had placed in the cub was slowly fading, replaced by a growing sense of unease. The misfortunes plaguing the Pride Lands began to escalate. A sudden rockslide blocked the path to the small remaining spring, making it even harder to access water. Then, a fire swept through a patch of the dry grasslands, destroying what little grazing land remained for the zebras and gazelles. Each incident, however small, was met with hushed whispers and suspicious glances towards Hope. One day, a young cub named Mhitu, known for his playful antics, wandered off from the other cubs. After a frantic search, he was found near the edge of the Pride Lands, scratched and frightened. Mhitu, barely able to speak through his tears, claimed he had been chased by a green-eyed monster who had tried to push him off the cliff. The accusation, though vague, sent shockwaves through the pride. All eyes turned to Hope, who stood alone, his green eyes wide with fear and confusion. Kovu rushed to his defense, but the damage had been done. The whispers turned into open accusations, the suspicion into outright hostility. "He's just like Scar," one of the lions roared. "He's trying to destroy us all. We should have banished him when we had the chance," another cried. Kiera, witnessing the scene, felt her heart sink. The fragile peace she had worked so hard to build was crumbling before her eyes. She looked at Hope, at his innocent face, and wondered if they had all been wrong. Was he truly a threat? Was he destined to bring darkness to the Pride Lands? The cost of peace, she realized, might be higher than she had ever imagined. Hidden amongst the increasingly hostile pride was a lion named Jaffer, one of Kovu's old rivals from the Outlands. Jaffer had always resented Kovu, believing he was weak for choosing to follow Kiera and embrace the ways of the Pride Landers. He saw Hope as an opportunity to undermine Kovu and seize power for himself. Jaffer had orchestrated the accidents plaguing the Pride Lands, carefully manipulating events to make it seem like Hope was responsible. He had started the fire, dislodged the rocks, and even coached Mhitu to make the false accusation. He whispered lies and spread rumors, fanning the flames of suspicion and prejudice. He approached the most disgruntled lions, preying on their fears and insecurities. Kovu is blinded by sentimentality, he would say. He's putting the entire pride at risk for the sake of one cub. We can't let him do this. We need to take action to protect ourselves from Hope before it's too late. Jaffer's plan was working. The pride was on the verge of turning against Kovu and Hope, ready to exile them both. He could almost taste victory, the sweet satisfaction of finally surpassing Kovu and claiming his rightful place as leader. But he knew he had to be careful. He couldn't afford to be exposed, not until he had complete control. He had to be patient, to wait for the perfect moment to strike the final blow. Later that evening, Kiera approached Kovu, her expression troubled. "Kovu," she said softly, "we need to talk." Kovu looked at her, his heart sinking. He knew what was coming. The weight of the pride's disapproval, the accusations against Hope, had finally taken their toll. Do you think we made a mistake?" Kiera asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Maybe the pride is right. Maybe Hope is too dangerous to keep here." Kovu felt a surge of anger, but he quickly suppressed it. He knew Kiera was speaking from a place of fear, not malice. "No," he said firmly, "we didn't make a mistake. Hope is innocent. He hasn't done anything wrong." "But what about Mhitu?" Kiera countered. "He said Hope chased him, tried to hurt him." "Mhitu is just a cub," Kovu replied. "He was probably scared, confused. Someone could have told him what to say." "Someone like who, Kovu?" Kiera asked, her eyes searching his. "Are you saying someone is trying to frame Hope?" Kovu hesitated. He hadn't wanted to voice his suspicions, but he couldn't deny the possibility. "It's possible," he admitted. "I have a feeling someone is trying to turn the pride against us." "But who would do that?" Kiera asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "Why? Maybe someone who wants to see the pride lands divided again," Kovu said grimly. "Someone who wants to take my place." The unspoken name of Jaffer hung heavy in the air between them. "What are we going to do?" Kiera asked, her eyes filled with fear. "We're going to protect Hope," Kovu said, his voice filled with determination. "We're going to prove his innocence, and we're going to find out who's behind all of this. We can't let fear and prejudice destroy everything we've built." But even as he spoke the words, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were fighting a losing battle. The following days were filled with tension and disagreement. Kiera, overwhelmed by the rising prejudice and the growing danger, wanted to keep Hope confined to Pride Rock, away from the other lions. She feared for his safety, believing that it was only a matter of time before something terrible happened. Kovu, however, refused. He believed that isolating Hope would only reinforce the pride's fears and suspicions. "We can't let them win," he argued. "We can't let them turn Hope into a prisoner. He needs to be around other cubs to learn and grow. We just need to be more careful to protect him." "But what if we can't protect him?" Kiera cried, her voice filled with desperation. "What if something happens to him? I can't bear the thought of it." "Then we'll fight," Kovu said, his voice resolute. "We'll fight for Hope, we'll fight for our pride, and we'll fight for the future of the Pride Lands." "But at what cost, Kovu?" Kiera asked, her eyes filled with tears. "How much more are we willing to sacrifice for this peace? Is it worth risking everything, even Hope's life?" Kovu didn't have an answer. He knew that Kiera was right, that the situation was spiraling out of control. But he couldn't bring himself to give up on Hope, to abandon him to the prejudice and hatred of the pride. He had made a promise, and he intended to keep it, no matter the cost. The argument ended without resolution, leaving a deep rift between them. The weight of their disagreement settled upon them both, heavy and suffocating. Kovu knew he had to do something to help Hope understand the situation, to prepare him for the challenges he would face. He decided to tell Hope about Scar, about his reign of terror, and about the importance of choosing a different path. He took Hope to a secluded spot overlooking the Pride Lands. "Hope," he said, his voice gentle, "there's something you need to know about your past." Hope looked at him, his green eyes filled with curiosity. "What is it, Kovu?" Kovu hesitated, unsure how to begin. "You have the eyes of Scar," he said finally. He was a lion who ruled the Pride Lands a long time ago. He was not a good lion. He told Hope about Scar's treachery, about how he had murdered Mufasa and seized the throne. He explained how Scar's reign had brought darkness and suffering to the Pride Lands, how he had allowed the hyenas to ravage the land, and how he had turned brother against brother. Hope listened intently, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Was he really that bad?" he asked. "He was," Kovu said, his voice grim. "And because you have his eyes, some lions are afraid of you. They think you might be like him." "But I'm not like him," Hope protested. "I would never do those things." "I know you wouldn't," Kovu said, his voice filled with conviction. "But you need to understand that others may not see that. You need to show them that you're different, that you're kind, that you're brave. You need to choose your own path, Hope, a path of light and compassion. Don't let Scar's legacy define you." Hope took Kovu's words to heart. He started small, offering to help the other cubs with their games, sharing his meager food rations, and comforting those who were scared or hurt. He was always polite and respectful, even to those who treated him with suspicion. One day, a brush fire broke out near the edge of the Pride Lands, threatening to spread to the dry grasslands. The other cubs panicked, unsure what to do. But Hope, remembering Kovu's teachings, sprang into action. He organized the cubs into a line, using their tails to sweep away the dry grass and create a firebreak. He directed them calmly and efficiently, his green eyes focused and determined. The other cubs, impressed by his bravery and leadership, followed his instructions without hesitation. Together, they managed to contain the fire, preventing it from spreading further. The older lions, witnessing the scene, were astonished. They had expected Hope to run and hide, or even to fan the flames. But instead, he had shown remarkable courage and selflessness. Slowly, perceptions began to change. Some lions started to see Hope not as a monster, but as a cub with the potential for greatness. They began to acknowledge his kindness, his bravery, and his willingness to help others. The ice of prejudice began to thaw, replaced by a glimmer of hope. Mitu, the cub who had accused Hope of attacking him, even approached him and apologized, admitting that he had been mistaken. Hope, with a gentle smile, forgave him, offering his paw in friendship. The tide was slowly turning. Far, enraged by Hope's growing acceptance, knew he had to act quickly. He couldn't allow Hope to win over the entire pride. He decided to eliminate Hope permanently, making it look like an accident. One afternoon, while Hope was playing near a steep ravine, Jaffer stalked towards him, his eyes filled with malice. He planned to push Hope over the edge, ensuring his death. But Kovu, who had been watching Hope closely, saw Jaffer's movements and sensed his intentions. With a roar, Kovu charged toward Jaffer, knocking him away from Hope just as he was about to strike. Jaffer, caught off guard, stumbled backward, his eyes filled with fury. "What do you think you're doing?" Kovu demanded, his voice shaking with anger. "I was just playing," Jaffer stammered, his eyes darting nervously. "Don't lie to me," Kovu growled. "I saw what you were trying to do. You were trying to hurt Hope." Jaffer, realizing he had been exposed, abandoned his pretense. "He's a monster," he snarled. "He needs to be eliminated before he destroys us all." "He's just a cub," Kovu retorted. "And you're a coward, preying on his innocence. You're the one who's been trying to divide the pride, who's been causing all the accidents." The other lions, alerted by the commotion, gathered around. They listened in shock as Kovu accused Jaffer of orchestrating the misfortunes and attempting to harm Hope. Jaffer, realizing he was cornered, tried to deny the accusations, but his guilt was written all over his face. Seeing Jaffer's exposed treachery, the lions were filled with shame and remorse. They realized that they had allowed fear and prejudice to cloud their judgment, that they had been too quick to judge Hope based on his lineage. They saw now that Jaffer, driven by his own ambition and hatred, had manipulated them all. "We were wrong," Nala said, her voice filled with regret. "We let fear control us, and we almost made a terrible mistake. Hope has shown us nothing but kindness and bravery. Simba added. He's proven that he's nothing like Scar. We should be ashamed of how we've treated him. The lions turned to Hope, their eyes filled with apology. We're sorry, Hope, one of them said. We judge you unfairly. We were wrong to doubt you, another added. You've shown us that you're a true Pride Lander. Hope, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support, smiled shyly. It's okay, he said. I understand. It wasn't easy for me either. The Pride then turned their attention to Jaffer, their faces filled with anger. You betrayed us, one of them roared. You tried to divide us, to destroy everything we've built. Jaffer, realizing he had lost, hung his head in shame. He was banished from the Pride lands, never to return. The Pride, united in their remorse and their newfound appreciation for Hope, rallied around him, offering him their protection and their love. They had learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of prejudice and the importance of forgiveness. Kiera, witnessing the transformation in the Pride, felt a surge of hope. The rift between her and Kovu began to heal, replaced by a renewed sense of trust and understanding. She knew that the time had come to make a public declaration, to solidify Hope's place within the Pride lands once and for all. She stepped forward, her voice ringing with authority. Lions of the Pride lands, she announced, we have all made mistakes. We allowed fear to cloud our judgment, and we almost made a terrible decision. But we have learned from our mistakes, and we have seen the truth. She turned to Hope, her eyes filled with love and admiration. Hope, she said, you have shown us that you are a true Pride Lander, that you are kind, brave, and selfless. You have proven that you are nothing like Scar. And for that, we are eternally grateful. She paused, taking a deep breath. Therefore, she continued, I, Kiera, Queen of the Pride Lands, publicly declare that Hope is one of us. He is a member of our pride, a son of our land, and he will always be welcome here. A cheer erupted from the assembled lions, their voices filled with joy and relief. They surged forward, offering Hope their congratulations and their support. Hope, his eyes shining with happiness, nuzzled against Kiera, grateful for her unwavering belief in him. The long shadow of Scar had finally been lifted, replaced by the bright light of hope and acceptance. As if in response to the Pride's collective change of heart, the sky began to shift. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising relief from the relentless sun. A gentle breeze rustled through the parched grasslands, carrying the scent of rain. The first drops began to fall, soft and hesitant at first, then growing into a steady downpour. The lions cheered, their faces upturned to the sky, feeling the cool water wash away the dust and the bitterness of the drought. The dry earth drank deeply, revitalizing the parched landscape. The watering hole began to refill, its muddy puddle transforming into a clear, sparkling oasis. The zebras and gazelles returned, their coats gleaming in the rain, their thirst quenched. The Pride lands began to bloom once more, its vibrant colors returning after months of desolation. The drought, which had seemed like an insurmountable obstacle, had finally broken. It was as if the land itself was celebrating Hope's acceptance, as if the healing of the Pride had triggered a corresponding healing of the environment. The drought's end symbolized the triumph of hope over despair, of forgiveness over prejudice, and of unity over division. The Pride lands were whole again, both in spirit and in body. The lions knew that they had faced a great challenge, but they had emerged stronger and wiser, ready to face whatever the future might hold, together. Years passed, and the Pride lands flourished. The memory of the drought faded, replaced by an era of abundance and prosperity. Kovu and Kiera ruled wisely and compassionately, ensuring that all members of the Pride were treated with fairness and respect. One sunny afternoon, Kovu and Kiera stood on Pride Rock, watching their children play. Among them was Hope, now a strong and handsome young lion, his green eyes sparkling with intelligence and kindness. He chased after the other cubs, his laughter echoing through the grasslands. There was no trace of Scar's darkness in him, only the bright light of hope and promise. He's grown into a fine lion, Kovu said, his voice filled with pride. He has, Kiera agreed, smiling. He's a testament to the power of forgiveness and the importance of choosing your own path. They watched as Hope playfully wrestled with another cub, his green eyes locking with theirs for a moment. He grinned, a wide, genuine smile that warmed their hearts. They knew that the Pride Lands were in good hands, that the future was bright. The camera pans out, showing Hope and the other cubs running and playing, their carefree laughter filling the air. The Pride Lands stretch out before them, a vibrant tapestry of life and color, a symbol of hope, unity, and the enduring power of love. The shadow of Scar was gone, replaced by a future free from fear and prejudice, a future where every lion, regardless of their past, could find their place in the circle of life.